Hey, this is Kyle Carver from Strong Dads. Strong Dads podcast would love to thank the Crimers Beer House for coming alongside of us. The Crimers Beer House was started in 1982 by the Crimer family, and since that time, they have definitely become a Cincinnati favorite. So if you're looking for an incredible meal in an incredible setting, definitely go down to Route 128 and check out the Crimers Beer House.
Welcome to Strong Dads. Hey, Kyle, how you doing this morning?
I'm great. How are you?
Wait, man, I got two Kyles I'm looking at here. This is going to be really
this is
tough.
a good show. Kyle and I, we got it.
I've been teamed up, and now you're probably both about the same age, too. And so now I got the old man in here taking on two youngsters.
We're ready.
This does not look good for me. Not at all.
How you been now?
I've been really good. Been really good. I beat you in a round of golf last week, only with handicap. So if it weren't for handicap, it would have not been a game. But, you know, hey.
It's good.
I got the benefit from that.
It's good.
Hey, we cannot wait to get into our show today because we have a special guest. A special guest, as I said before, a man by the name of Kyle Thompson. And Kyle is the host of Undaunted Life, and also it's a podcast as well as a devotional series. Kyle, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, guys.
All right. So the reason why this is something that we're excited about is because, as we've said before, when we've had other guests on that are in the same genre that we are in, is we want guys across this world talking to men and encouraging and challenging men. And Kyle, you have been doing a fantastic job with that. So Kyle, help us out a little bit. Tell our listeners and viewers who you are and what your ministry is about.
Yeah. So again, as you mentioned, Kyle Thompson, Undaunted Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness. And so we've been doing that since 2016, 2017. And it started out with a devotional series that a lot of people have already done on YouVersion. It was the 21-day men's devotional. And we kind of break it down to cultivating spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis. Right. And so, you know, we can spend a lot of time going into that. But again, I go into that in the devotionals. But for us, that's what a well-rounded man is. Someone that cultivates spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis. And resilience is a very important key there because everyone tries to deal with strength, right? I mean, you got two guys, you know, you got the biceps behind you, but it's like all the guys are very, very worried about being strong. The thing about being strong, whether that's spiritually, mentally, or physically, is strength wanes over time. It's just a natural thing that happens, right? So, you know, I forget, some dude from the UK won World's Strongest Man this year, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the day after the competition, he's no longer the strongest man in the world because his body's broken down. He's beat up. Somebody else is stronger than that man that day. Yeah. But that athlete is a very, very resilient athlete. His ability to bounce back is very, very important, right? And that's what I talk about with resilience, because you are going to get knocked down spiritually, mentally, or physically, right? You know, physically is the easiest one, guys. I mean, you're training for a triathlon and something happens to your knee. You're training for a jiu-jitsu tournament and you bust up your shoulder. It's the ability to bounce back that's important, to not wallow in your injury or wallow in your circumstances. And that's what I feel like is very, very important for men. But the other key before I toss it back to you is, you know, equipping men to push back darkness. Okay, well, what do you mean by darkness? Most people inherently know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about darkness. But to be more specific, there's spiritual darkness that all of us are vying with. Whether you believe in it or not doesn't change whether or not it's real. And the other thing is there's a lot of encroaching and already here cultural darkness, right? So Marxism, socialism, the critical theories, including critical race theory, authoritarianism around mask mandates. I mean, there's so many different things. And I constantly have guys reached out to me with this scenario. Email, hey, my company's about to institute a COVID vaccine mandate, or we can't work here. I have a 6-figure job. There's no other jobs in this area that would pay me that much. I'm about to get married. We want to start a family. What do I do? And I can't answer to that man exactly what he should be doing because he has a lot of things he needs to discuss with the people in his life that, you know, and I'm not privy to a lot of those discussions. But the important thing is for a lot of Christians, especially for a lot of conservative Christians, is we never look at a hill and think, that's a hill worth dying on, because we're so nice and we're so polite, right? And we don't want to rock the boat. And, you know, we're feminized men now, and we don't really want to, you know, put our chest there and raise our voice because someone might get offended and start crying. And the problem is you don't fight on that hill. You don't fight on that hill. You don't fight on that hill. And one day you wake up and the war's over and you never picked your sword up. And so we are trying to equip men with the ability to be able to push darkness. Because if you go before your school board, because they gave your, 8-year-old a essay to write about why they should be guilty for being born white, don't know anything about critical race theory, you can't push back that darkness. If you don't know that it comes from critical theory, that comes from the Frankfurt School, that comes from Marxism, that comes from the pits of hell, you're not going to be able to push back that darkness. So that's what we're trying to do, is equip men to be able to do so.
So when you say that pushback darkness, you're basically worldly concepts, obviously, that stem from hell, right? That stem from Satan. Is that, am I hearing you correct when you're talking about push?
When I first talked about it, I said there's spiritual darkness as well that we need to be able to push back. And so one of the only ways that you can do that is by utilizing the Holy Spirit, relying on God, really the triune God, to kind of help you do those things. But darkness manifests itself in the world that we live in, right? That's the easiest thing to fight back against, because for most people, they don't know their enemy, right? And if you don't know your enemy and you don't know yourself, you'll know battle. That's Sun Tzu, right? And so this is one of the things, is most guys know that there's an enemy, but they don't know anything about it. A buddy I went to college with, we're sitting on the back porch about a year ago, and I mentioned Marxism, and he goes, "Marxism, what is that?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" He's like, "No, I've never heard of that. What is Marxism?" And here he's complaining about things that come from that worldview, that are downstream of that worldview. He had never heard the term, right? And so I think that that's very important, because again, if you don't know who your enemy is and where they are, how are you going to fight them?
Yeah. And all, that reminds me of the idea of the enemy is within us, right? We don't even know what it is. Kyle, I find that whole conversation a huge one. I have been doing Bible studies and working with men for a long time. And for a long time, I have come to the idea, and myself included, that I am so of the world, I don't even know how of the world I am. Everything from, because I'm, when the frog's in the boiling pot, he doesn't know that it's boiling when he was there from day one. And so the idea that we would actually have to step outside of ourselves and realize how entrenched we are in the thinking, in the feminization, in the critical race theory, into the victimhood, all of these things, I'm not even going to recognize it if it is all I've ever lived in. And so when I had that sort of awakening, like, holy crud, how do I even start to see how deep in the woods I am? And so I want to pose that question to you. I have an answer in my mind that I actually work with men, but I want to see, like, okay, how do you get this man who doesn't even know what Marxism is? How do you get him to begin to understand how lost he is?
The thing about this is people try to overcomplicate things by an extreme degree, right? And so they're like, gosh, I just want to get in shape. And, they start like reading blogs, right, about how to get in shape. And they start, getting magazines from Runner's World. They go by stores and they buy some equipment. But what they never do is they never put on their shoes and hit the pavement, right? And so for that guy, it's like, here's a copy of the Communist Manifesto. It's free online. Oh, you like listening to it? It's free on YouTube. Listen to it, read it. And then we'll come back together and we'll talk about the things that surprise you, the things that you didn't know was there. Because here's the other thing. This is kind of nefarious thing. You have a lot of people that are on the conservative side, the anti-Marxism side, that have also never read Marx, right? And so it's like, again, if you don't understand your enemy, what are you fighting? And so this is my pushback to people that only read the Bible, which makes me sound like a heretic, but stick with me. But if you only read the Bible, that is great, because you will have the answers to the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, right? The gospel, the good news. However, if you cannot engage in culture, then what good is that scripture at that point? Because I have people that will only argue the abortion topic using scripture. And so if you go up to some purple-headed weirdo that thinks the Bible is just an amalgamation of a bunch of, stories and fables from 2,000 years ago, why in the world would they take you seriously?
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you don't preach gospel truths by any stretch of the imagination, but you meet them where they're. So if they're on the logic train, you need to be sharp in the world of logic. If they're on the philosophical train, you need to have your philosophy ready to go. If they're a Stoic, you better have read Marcus Aurelius. Like it's one of those situations where it's like, if anything else, it's a good way to get to the gospel. Like people talk about this all the time, find something you have in common with somebody, the music they like, or a sport they like to watch, or, an activity they like to do. It's the same exact thing, except we're trying to get people to the kingdom of God. And some people aren't going to be argued there by some obscure passage in the Old Testament. And so for a lot of people, It's just literally getting down to brass tacks. But here's one thing that I like to do with people, especially people that are pretty, combative about something that they disagree with you on. The thing that has saved me so much grief, especially over the last several years, is I will ask them one question. I said, hey, if you were wrong about your point of view, would you want to know? I just flat out ask them, because for a lot of people, the answer is no. I don't want to know, because I'm not wrong. You're wrong. And you're a bigot and you're a racist and you're a this. And it's like, great. How about them Cowboys? Let's talk about some other topic, because this is useless. This is a useless topic to discuss with you at this moment. But if they do engage and you say, hey, I think there might be some things in your worldview that aren't really grounded in truth. And I mean that in love, and I want to help you. Are you willing to be helped in these areas? Are you willing to maybe read a book or two that I might suggest for you over the next couple of months? And then we can kind of get together and see if you still feel the same way. And if they're amenable to it, then walk through the door. If not, move on. Cast your pearls before swine. Don't waste your time with it.
Right, man. Great stuff. So one of the challenges, Kyle, that I see with what you're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, and this is a challenge out to men. Men aren't readers. Okay. I mean, I don't want to generalize that every man is not a reader, but I've worked with men for a long time. And the idea of you saying, read this or read that or whatever, you just lost 50% of them right there. All right. So part of our challenge here, when we talk about getting content, has had to go beyond teaching through reading. Reading is definitely always on the table. I always want to encourage it. But if I'm going to get the dude that's out on the construction site, who's a good, strong man, who is a good guy, but if I'm going to get him to actually understand what it is he's fighting and how he should fight, reading is probably not going to be the most effective tool for him. All right. So what do? I mean, at the end of the day, I can't say, well, you just better learn to read, because that is not.
Well, here's the deal.
The remedy.
He knows how to read. He doesn't want to. That's the difference. I think for most men and most people in this area, where they're, doing it from a Christian worldview or otherwise, their expectations are way too low for men. Mm-hmm. And the thing is if you set the bar here, the guy misses, he's somewhere down here. But if you set the bar here off the screen and he misses, he might end up somewhere right here. Mm-hmm. So for me, I expect a lot. And again, the way to think about this is physical, right? So when I lead people through a workout, I'm trying to brutalize them, right? I'm trying to make sure that is the hardest physical thing that they've done that week. Because you know what's not going to happen? Death. They're not going to die. They're just straight up not going to die. It's going to be very uncomfortable. They're going to push through. But I'm the guy wall sits. I mean, most of your listeners know what a wall sit is. You put your back up against the wall, you bring your butt down, your legs are at a 90-degree angle. There's nothing underneath your butt, and you just sit there, and it sucks. After about 45 seconds, it's the worst thing that you've ever thought to do in your life. And then there's however much time left. When I have my guys do wall sits, right? These guys are shaking and breathing, and I'm not going to make it. And then their butt hits the mat, and I go, get up right now. And whoop, their butt's up. It's a miracle. It's like I have healing powers in the tips of my fingers, and I just shot it at them. The thing is their minds were weak. Their bodies weren't that weak. Now, there is a breaking point for everybody physically, right? But it's a mind issue. And so you have these dorks that have not read a book since high school, and they wear it like a badge of honor. They're the same idiots in high school. They were like, oh, you studied for the test? Look at this nerd. This guy freaking... Why in the world would we encourage that? And so for me, I don't leave that on the table, the option on the table, because if a guy especially comes to me and says, hey, I really want some help. I really want to do this. And I say, well, here's a book to read. I don't really read. Then you don't need my help. You obviously know how to figure this out, because you came to me for help. I gave you a way to get help, and you're just not really willing to do it. Oh, well, reading's hard for me. Do you know how to read? Do you know what words mean when your eyes go across them? Because again, you have to dig in. This is from my sales background. The first pushback is never the real one, right? Oh, I don't have enough money right now. That's never the real excuse. It's the next excuse, or the excuse beyond that. These people know how to read. They might be bad at it. Like me, I'm still a slow reader, right? I read quite a few books a year. I read very slowly. It's hard for me to maintain concentration, right? But we live in a world where you can have a book read to you.
Right.
on your little supercomputer that you have in your pocket, right? You throw in your headphones, Mr. Construction Man, and you just get after it. Oh man, I didn't really listen to that last section because I was doing something else. Oop, rewind. And so the thing I think for us, especially for guys in this space, is don't expect excellence, right? Expect excellence in all things. Do not accept, I can't read that book. I won't read that book. You give them a deadline and you give them the book. Remove everything. Hey, how do you like to read? Are you a physical book guy? Are you an audio book guy? Are you whatever? And you get them that book. You remove all barriers to entry, right? And so for me, I don't really do a lot of audiobooks. I don't do a lot of like real books. I like e-readers because my book is always with me. Whether I'm sitting, waiting on, oil change or, about to go to bed, my book is always with me. And so again, stop giving guys excuses because they will take them. Society is giving them excuses as well.
Right. So I would be 100% on board with that idea, that what you just said, stop giving them excuses, because I get the guys that say they can't read, and that's where I go. That's an excuse because, like you said, we have audio, we have e-readers, we have video. And so I boil that down to exactly where you went from the beginning. And that is, do you want this or not? Do you want to walk? Do you really want to walk? Pick up your mat and walk. Yeah. If not, just sit here and complain and be a victim.
Right. Well, because guys, I know that, sorry to cut you off. I got a little bit of a lag here, but like, that's the thing is these guys either want help or they don't.
Right.
Right. And it is not my job to follow them around and make sure they do the right things.
Right.
It's partially my job because of my calling from God to help give them the wisdom to make some of those right decisions, to give them some scaffolding with which to build their life with, but I can't do it for them. Right. Like we have to go back to physical. I can't work out for you. And if I had the option, I would choose not to, right? And so it's like, at the end of the day, you either want this or you don't. The number of people that have come up to me and said, Kyle, I want to be in shape. It's like, do you really? What do you mean by that? Well, you haven't done anything to show me that you do. Like, here's the easiest workout advice I could give you. Move more, eat less. Are you willing to do that? Well, I got this thyroid issue. And, sometimes when I work out, I get like, dude, I'm sorry. I don't have time for this. Like, and I know that seems cruel. But it's like, I have such limited in my life to get the things done that I need to get done, right? One kid here, one kid on the way. I don't have time to babysit you. You're a grown man. Go be a grown man. Go be mediocre somewhere else. I can't deal with it.
Right.
Well, that's man, just listen to you, Kyle. Something that I'm hearing a lot is the expectation side of what you're talking about and how, you have a high expectation for the men to come to you. I think in general, men, we miss that mark. We don't have high expectation for ourselves. And just listen to one of your early podcasts that you have, with Undaunted Life. One of the first ones you talked about how churches are kind of missing that mark as well. Could you talk a little bit about, because I would agree 100% that I think churches miss the mark when it comes to men and reaching men. Obviously, churches need strong men. The backbone of a church should be a strong man. Like, where do you think the church is it because of the expectations of not putting on the man, or where do you think churches are missing that mark when it comes to today's man?
Yeah, the churches are doing a horrible job. I'm very, very critical of the modern day church for a lot of reasons, but specifically in the world of manhood, because they've built a Leviathan of a presentation that is very, very feminized, right? You have from the pastor on down. So music is the easiest one to point out, right? So episode 176 of my podcast was contemporary worship music is for women and effeminate men, because most men go to a contemporary worship service and they don't know why it's weird for them to sing these songs until they look at the lyrics and remove the word Jesus and insert the word Bob. And it's like, oh, it's like I'm singing to my boyfriend. Right? This is weird. I want to embrace him in my arms and I want to, bring him to my bosom. And I just want to roll up this Lamb of God and put him in my pocket. I love him. And they're just like, ooh, that just doesn't really, they don't like that very much. They need the Psalms, right? They need, the warrior God, right? They need the Lion of Judah, right?
Yeah.
But churches horrible job of that. And then they just lament the fact that men aren't willing to get involved. Oh, men don't want to volunteer and men don't want to go on missions and men don't want to do on this. And it's like, because your men aren't engaged. Hello. Right. This isn't hard. It's not hard to define what the problem is, to diagnose it, but it is really hard to do it. It's hard to make a man-friendly church because this is what most churches do. They find some young pastor, right? Maybe the associate youth pastor or something like that. He's got big muscles and they're like, all right, you're going to be our men's ministry guy, which is the last title under like 7 other titles. And once or twice a year, they're going to do a men's event, which is some sort of a chili cook-off where only 3 of the chilies are any good, or they're going to have some former football player come in who used to women and snort coke, and he's going to be like, I was saved by Jesus and now it's great. And in the crowd can really understand that guy because he played D1 football and they didn't. And, he used to snort crack off hookers' bellies and they didn't. And it's just like, I don't understand. Like, this doesn't really affect my life in any way. Cool story, bro. But that's nothing that I can like take with my life. And then these churches just wipe their hands. They're like, whoop, we did men's ministry. And then they lament. Why aren't these men involved? Why aren't they engaged? Why aren't they doing anything? It's because your presentation sucks from the head pastor on down. You're not talking to the men. You're constantly talking about the Lamb of God and you're ignoring the Lion of Judah. You're constantly talking about grace and you're not talking about truth. You're not even trying anymore. A lot of these seeker-sensitive churches, you know why a lot of men go to seeker-sensitive churches? Because it's the fast food of church. Right? You don't have to invest a whole lot. Like, you can get really full. Sorry, just bang my desk because I'm getting all excited. You can be really full with $5. Go walk into Taco Bell with $5. It's not healthy. It's not good for you. If you do that every day, it's probably going to kill you. That's what a lot of this, seeker-sensitive church model is. Come in for an hour, get your little burrito and your soda, and move on with your day. But again, the work of building a man-friendly church is really, really difficult. Most churches aren't willing to do the work.
Okay. So I love it, man. I love it. You actually sound like the minister that I listen to every Sunday. Okay. Because he's very strong and out like that. So what does the man church look like? What would that service look like? What versus the 2 men events per year? What would it look like?
Some of the most man-friendly church. Let me back up just a little bit before I get into that. Context is incredibly important. And so for me to just say, here's the model and put it on every single church and every single community would be foolish for me, right? Communities have their own personalities. A church in Manhattan versus a church in rural Kansas, you can't just do the same thing. It's not the same type of people, right? So that's the first part. You have to look at your demographics of your church. You have to look at ages, all those different things. But all those caveats aside, so I don't get canceled later. If I haven't been canceled by now, I'm probably not going to get canceled. What churches need to do is they need to, this is so simple. This sounds so stupid. I realize how dumb this is going to sound before I say it. They need to have the men in mind when preparing their music and their sermon content.
Yeah.
This is not earth-shattering stuff. Okay. After I release, the podcast about contemporary worship music, the number of worship leaders that reach out to me directly that were like, I've never thought about the men when picking the songs. I just picked out the songs that I knew my band could play or songs that I thought was good. And a lot of these men admitted, I am a little bit more artistic in nature, right? Kind of that rough and tumble construction worker, MMA fighter. I don't really understand that guy. Those aren't my friends. And so just the fact that they had to think about the men in their church, right? And then I even challenged some of these guys like, hey, if you see a guy that's super disengaged during the singing, like, oh my gosh, another song. Oh, there's the chorus for the 27th time. This is awesome. So glad I'm here. Go talk to that guy after service. Be like, hey man, I know this is a little bit weird, but I kind of noticed that you weren't really engaged with the music. You weren't really engaged with the worship. And I know there might be a lot of reasons for that, but this is my job. And it's my job to help you guys worship before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. How can I do better? Is it the song selection? Do you just not like singing in public? Do you have a bad voice and you're embarrassed by it? Did you get raped by the music minister in elementary school? Like, I've heard all these stories, right? Like, these are all real things that have happened. And so there's reasons behind that. But again, moving off of the music into the lead pastor, are you preaching to the men? These family shepherds who are supposed to be leading their families, leading their wives and leading their children? Or are you preaching to the women because it's easier? Right. It is way easier to preach to women. Oh my gosh. Just talk. Okay. I was about to say something that would definitely get me canceled, but you're talking about these soft subjects. You're talking about these things that are easy to understand. You're talking about love and you're talking about feelings and you're talking about things that women they intuitively get. It's almost like we are biologically wired that way. Mm-hmm. But the men in the audience are like, oh my gosh, again, even if they don't understand why, they're like, I get it. God loves me. I get it. I get it. Things are really hard in my life right now. What do I do? Like, it seems impossible to be a good man and to run my business and to be a good father and to be a doting husband. They're in the fight. And you're over here talking about Jesus kissing people on the tips of their noses while he's carrying a lamb around. It's like, so again, without getting into the specifics of the actual church, the number of men they have there, if they're a dying church or a growing church and all that, think of the men when you're thinking of these things. Like, most of these guys are men. So it's like, reach down the front of your pants, realize you still have a pair, preach like it, sing like it.
Yeah. And I tell you, I love it. Recently I had an opportunity to go to a church. I won't even name the church, but it was a church out in Arizona. I have a buddy that actually works there, and the place is just growing like gangbusters. And I went to an event that they had actually for the high schoolers. And I noticed something I'd never seen before. They had probably 1,500 high schoolers there. And I noticed that probably 2/3 of them were high school boys, young men. And they were the jocks, right? They were the big boys. They were the popular guys. And so I pulled my buddy aside. I'm like, okay, wait. This is totally flip-flopped of anything that I'm used to seeing. Normally I see 10 guys over in the corner, and I see all these girls all over the place talking at these bigger events. And I'm like, what gives here? And he's like, we learned 25 years ago that every piece of marketing and push and content that we put out is to men first. Because we know that when we get the man to stay in the church, the family stays in the church and the family stays together. And I was just like, wow.
Well, there are a lot of progressive people that are like, oh, that's not real. When you get the man, the rest of the family comes behind. Let's pretend it's not.
Right.
Anecdotally, it seems to work. It worked in this church. And here's the other thing, guys, that I find so interesting. The most man-friendly churches don't have men's ministry, right? Like capital M, capital M. They don't have that.
Yeah.
Their entire church is a ministry to men, because church is not about programming. It's about ministering in a lot of ways. And if you're not ministering to your flock, what are you expecting them to do? Yeah. Right. And so again, a lot of these churches, like, you ask them, what do you do for men's ministry? And they just kind of chuckle. They're like, we treat the men like men, and we tell them how they're supposed to act from a biblical standpoint. Right. The women fall in line from a biblical standpoint. The children fall in line from a biblical standpoint. And wouldn't you know it, we don't have a problem with volunteerism. We don't have a problem with raising money. We don't have a problem with people going on mission work. It's amazing because everyone's thinking about the program. Right. There's a church here in my area that used to do this thing called Beast Feast. Right. And it was that big, hey, we're going to get together, eat meat and beans, and have some guy from the outdoor channel come and speak to everybody. And guess how it moved the needle for men in their church? Not at all, because the men showed up, they had a good time, they shot some bows and arrows, and then they moved on with their life. And the next Sunday, they had this effeminate old pastor get up there and do his normal little ditty. And, he got off the stage with his Mr. Rogers sweater and he went on about his day. And the men were still disengaged from that church. And they're shocked. They're absolutely shocked. But we did Beast Feast last year. Why aren't these men engaged? It's not hard to discern what the problem is.
Yeah, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to, man. Kyle, like, you obviously, our listeners, our viewers can obviously see it. I see it. I hear it from you. Like, man, you have a burning passion for this, right? I mean, it's obvious. Like, where did that stem from? Like, what was the turning point in your life? What brought you to do the Undaunted Life? What brought you to feel the way you do about men, about churches missing the mark, about society, the way that, again, society is missing the mark? Where did that stem from? Where did that come from?
Well, for those of you listening to this and not watching this, I am a ginger, and that has a lot to do with it. And so if you're born with red hair, you're basically a walking genetic deformity. So you overcompensate with anger. And so that's part of it. So now it's not as much anger, it's passion. I'm passionate, whatever phrase people want to use. So that's part of it, right? It's hard for me to not get excited about an issue and to not really want to talk about it forcefully. So that's number one. But I never thought I would share this story, but I've shared it a lot up to this point, so I might as well share it again. When I was in my mid-20s, I was running sprints, which I like to do. I like to torture myself by running as fast as I possibly can. for as long as I possibly can. And so I'm walking back to the starting line. And again, I'm in my mid-20s and I hear what can only be described as the voice of God, not like booming, like, the 10 Commandments movie from back in the day, but it was like everything was quiet. And I heard God tell me, you're going to be the next generation's John Eldridge. And I was like, John Eldridge? You mean the guy that sold over 1 million copies of Wild at Heart? You mean the men's ministry guy, that guy? Like, get out of here. So I put that thought away, put it in my backpack and moved on with the rest of my life. But as the years kept going on, I kept being brought into these men's ministry situations, seeing the same problems with effeminate men and with men not hitting the mark, with these struggle sessions where all these guys are trying to recover from porn and they're coming together in these groups. They're like, well, I made it days and then I jerked off. And then it's like, oh, dang it. And then everybody basically hugs them like, it's okay. Try harder next week. And I'm like, really? Like, what are we doing here? We might as well all be like crocheting or something like this. And so I just kept running into these situations and I kept developing my own personal philosophy on this. I kept feeling the calling of God. I kept, reading through the scriptures, reading through other books. And then it just kind of was an accidental spark. The inventors of the YouVersion Bible app, which has been downloaded, I don't know, 1 billion times or something like that, is 3 miles away from my house. Right. And so I used to go to that church and I walked in one day and I was like, man, this guy was on staff. I was like, these devotionals for men on this app are garbage. These are horrible. These are women's devotionals for men, right? They're women's devotionals that have like wood on the artwork or metal or a guy holding a sword going on a hiking trip. And it's like, but it's not real, right? If you actually read it, it's like the stuff is junk. And he's like, okay, big tough guy, Mr. Writer guy, why don't you write one? Why don't you write a devotional?
Yeah.
And I was like, again, he made the expectation level pretty high, right? He didn't say, yeah, you're right. That really stinks. You want to go get some lunch? Like, he challenged me. I was like, all right, buddy. So I wrote that 21-day devotional, 7 days on spiritual resilience, 7 on mental and 7 on physical. And that was kind of the spark. People wanted more. It was doing very, very well. At one point it was the second most read men's devotional in the entire app behind the pastor of the church that founded the app. And then it was like, well, I don't like writing very much. Like I'm not horrible at it, but I hate it. So then it just kind of became the podcast and I didn't know what that was going to do. I just said, well, if you're going to do it, you might as well do it well and, be consistent. So I put out at least 1 episode a week since 2017. And, you have to talk about the things that are going on around you. So you're going to be talking about cultural topics. You're going to be talking about societal things, political things, sports, military, all kinds of different things. And so it just kind of evolved, Kyle, over time. I didn't set out to do those things, but I just can't help but be this way. And one quick thing, I know I'm going long on this answer, but I think it's important. In my mid-20s, I had this mentor of mine who I worship this guy. He was so smart and so renowned, and he was everything thought I wanted to be, right? But he was a very calm guy, a very, very cerebral guy. He was a lean backer, not a lean forwarder of a guy. And he told me one day when we're doing one of our, mentoring sessions or whatever, he's like, Kyle, sometimes when you come in the room, I get really excited. And other times you're just exhausting. You just exhaust me with your energy. But his point was not learn how to bridle that energy, Wild Mustang. His point was you need to learn how to be calm like me. Oh. And I was like, okay, because I'm an idiot. I'm 25 years old. My brain's barely fully developed. I'm like, okay, I need to be the calm guy. So that's like telling a horse not to run. That's like telling a shark not to swim. And so I that on for a few weeks or a few months and the clothes just didn't fit, right? The calm guy thing just didn't work because the thing about this is be who you are. Yes. So if you're an introvert, don't pretend to be an extrovert. It's going to exhaust you. It's going to be terrible. If you're not the bombastic, center of attention, life of the party, be that person. It's so weird and everybody knows you're not that person. Just be who you are. So this crazy, talks with his hands, screams a lot, loses his voice, ginger bearded hair on fire thing. That's just kind of who I am. And so a lot of people are like, yes, you're very passionate. And the answer is true, but that's just how I present it. There are a lot of guys that are just as passionate as me. They just present it in a different way. John Eldridge, who is now a mentor of mine, he's very calm. He's very subdued. He doesn't raise his voice. He's more cerebral. He comes from a counseling background. Like those are just not who I am. Like I'm going to poke my finger in your chest to make my point, whereas he's going to, kind of ease you into it. But everybody has their style. Everybody's wired a certain way for a certain reason. So that's why I do it this way.
That's awesome. I want to tell you something about John Eldridge. So I'm quite a bit older than you guys, and I went into John Eldridge's Wild at Heart Bible study. I don't know, gosh, it's been whenever that book first came out. Okay. And I got mad. I got mad at him, and I got mad that I didn't understand it. I was like, really, dude? Like, you got to like tell us to go and hike up a mountain to feel like a man? Like, really? And then I'm in my counseling sessions and working with people and coaching, and I'm realizing men don't even act like men anymore. John had the foresight to see it. But it seemed, I grew up in a manly home. Like, my dad was kicking our butt from day one. We were splitting wood. You were getting dirty. And when we were tough in that way. And it didn't make sense to me that men didn't know how to be men in terms of using their vitality and strength. And when John's presenting this stuff, I'm like, really? Like, is there really a market for this? And then when I watched that over the next 5 years explode, I'm thinking, holy cow, this is no different than why men sign up for triathlons, do MMA fighting. Men have lost a purpose and challenge. My dad, who's as tough as nails, thought the idea of me signing up for a triathlon was the dumbest thing in the world. Why don't you just go out and work your butt off? Why do you have to go create, because he was tough. But we have had it so easy and so feminized, and our world is so comfortable that we did not have that passion. And so John started to point that out, like, man, that's a starving man soul right there. And so I've come to appreciate it. One of these days, I want to have him on our show just because I want to tell him I didn't like his work at all at first. But
he'll be okay with that.
Yeah, no, but I've come to realize, like, wow, we are so far gone. We don't know how far gone we are. We are so far of the world, we don't even know. And so one of the things that helped me, you brought up anger and then passion. Kyle will vouch for me here. Just about every time I describe what I came from, I have an angry passion for what I do. I was working in the schools, and I was constantly dealing with men who were basically measuring their manhood by the size of their muscles, the size of their vehicle, or the size of their bank account. And that's how they measured manhood. And instead of measuring the quality of their relationship with their wife and running their family. And so I was dealing with the fallout all the time of the guy who had it all, but yet he had the hot chick down at the bar also on Saturday nights while his wife was at home. And that created a real life experience of an angry passion. And so that's, I am so much on board with just that idea. Like, one, we have to get men where they are. So the idea that we come in and yell and scream, many of our men today don't even get why you're yelling and screaming, because they don't get, like, well, what's his problem? Why is he all crazy? Because they haven't seen and actually studied the true fallout of when men aren't men. The true fallout is the wreckage of the family, the wreckage of the community, the wreckage of the nation. That's the true fallout. And if you've always been in the pot and you've just always seen it that way, you can't see outside of it. And so that's where, I have to now grab men. I always tease Kyle because he's my young counterpart here. I'm like, he hasn't seen anything but that. I was fortunate to see examples of men who still fought in World War II, of men who said, hey, suck it up, Buttercup. We got a bigger job to do here. And so we have to really grab men and let them see, hey, this problem that we see in this world is not because of the world. It's because the men let it happen. And we have to be aggressive to get back out and reignite that flame. I love your passion. Keep the red hair, dude.
Hey, yeah, I dyed it once, or I bleached it for, junior high baseball because the whole team did it. But aside from that, that's just how I look like. So just deal with it.
So Kyle, we want to wrap up. What are some of the things that you feel like every man needs to start opening his eyes to if we're going to get a grip on this? I don't care whether you have one thing or you got 10 things. What are some things that you want to encourage men to say, if you could open your eyes, this would be a good place to start?
Yeah, I'd say for most men, again, our definition of what a man is a biological male that cultivates spiritual, mental, and physical resilience on a daily basis. Okay. A lot of men are crushing it if they're crushing it in any area, it's usually just one, right? So maybe they're the gym bro, right? They got muscles on top of muscles, but they haven't read a book since high school. Maybe they're a big time reader. They love the mental side, but they couldn't sprint to the end of the parking lot without keeling over, type of a deal. But what society gives us is a steady dose of caricature masculinity and the categorization of toxicity, right? So the caricature masculinity is the guy that drinks whiskey and smokes cigars and has a 4-wheel drive truck and has big muscles and has, the bank account and the women and all that. And some of those things are okay. Some of those things are sinful, but they're not inherently manly, and they're not inherently good, and they're not inherently bad, right? It's just a caricature of masculinity, because I'm freaking brutally masculine men that like art. They like cooking. They like listening to classical music. They like going on a run. They don't fight, but man, these guys are just, they're manly. They're so manly, right? So I don't really care about all the caricature stuff. Same thing is true about the categorization problem. Is society is basically telling us that that masculinity is in and of itself toxic, right? And a lot of men are subscribing to that. So you have idiots putting out this quote or this bogus stat that 1 in 5 college-age women will be sexually assaulted, right? Even though that stat is completely bogus, right? If you actually look at the stats, a woman being held down and forcibly penetrated and raped is counted the same as a woman that gets whistled at. Oh, hey, what's up, fine lady? It's the same category, right? The sexual assault stats more like 1 in 60, 1 in 65, which is still horrible. But again, if you're a young man, right, college age, and you're sitting in your dorm room, I've said this before, and there's 5 guys sitting in your dorm room, and you believe that 20% stat, one of you is a rapist. That's your paradigm. And so people are telling you, just by the fact that you are a male, that you are toxic, you might believe them. You may very well believe them, right? And what do you do with that knowledge? It's going to paralyze you. For one, you're not going to go up to women and ask them to go on a date because you're going to be afraid of being Me Too'd. You're not going to be, willing to stand up and say your piece in class because, there's the woke crowd over there and there's the women over there. And I'm a cisgendered, white, straight, male Christian. Like I can't speak up and say anything. Again, John Eldridge, he said on one of my podcasts, is like, just because masculinity is dangerous doesn't mean that we should get rid of it, right? Because medicine is dangerous. That means we put it in the hands of people that know how to use it. Weapons are dangerous. That means we put them in the hands of good people that know how to use it. The same thing is true about masculinity. But where all this goes is most men don't consult anybody when it comes to masculinity. They go with their paradigm. Who their dad was, who their uncle was, who their coaches were in high school, the people that they were around. As you just said, you were surrounded by masculine, manly men that helped you and kind of taught you along the way. Surrounded by masculine, manly men that didn't really teach me anything along the way. So a lot of those typically masculine things, like especially like being able to fix stuff and like, that kind of thing, it's something that I missed out on entirely, right? I went the athletic route. I didn't go the military route. So I missed out on some of that, right? And so for a lot of men, from a prescription purpose, to kind of get back to your question, you suck at one of those areas really, really bad: spiritual, mental, or physical resilience. Okay. Identify it and fix it. There are a lot of ways to fix it. If you want to listen to my podcast, listen to my whole backlog, like some people are doing, and helping them figure out what areas they need help in, great, go for it. Right. I'm not trying to be everything to everybody. So if you're spiritually adept and you're a prayer warrior and you hit your knees and you fight, you fight with God and you do all those things and you read a bunch of books, but you're really, really out of shape, don't come to me because I don't have a kinesiology degree. I'm not a personal trainer. I just work out a lot. But there's so many resources online. Like this idea that we can't fix our problems are completely absurd, while at the same time realizing that there are certain problems that are just completely outside of our purview and outside of our power. And we need God. We need God to intervene. There are things that we can't possibly get on the other side of without his help. And he will be glorified because everyone around us will realize, yeah, Kyle had no chance at fixing that. And then all of a sudden it was different. What happened? Yeah, Christ happened. That's what happened. And so again, there's so many ways to take that question. But again, for most guys out there, freaking get off your butt. Like figure it out. Like this, most of your problems are for unforced errors. They're you problems, right? I was talking to my Sunday school as I was teaching Sunday school last week, and I was talking about Afghanistan. I was talking about how our Christian posture should be, especially towards the refugee or the sojourner and different things like that. And we live in a very affluent area of a very affluent city. And it's like, guys, we don't have real problems. We have unforced errors. most of the problems in this community you've created on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you're the one that cheated on your wife. You're the one that cheated on your taxes. You're the one that looked at porn. You're the one that, destroyed your relationship with your children. These are all unforced errors, right? You were just looking at other things. We're not worried about the Taliban coming from Oklahoma City out to the suburbs to come get us, right? Chop our heads off because we have a Bible app on our phone. And so again, for most people, realize your life's not that bad. Things don't suck as much as they nearly seem like they do. And be a man and take care of it. Take ownership and get after it.
Yeah. Own it. Love it. Kyle, I just greatly appreciate your time. I greatly appreciate your message. I know this is something that we just want to continue to beat the drum on. I do see a active turning and awakening of our younger guys that are seeing, this is something I really want to build. And so my wife and I have a ministry called Rock Solid Families. And the idea on that is Matthew 7:24, are you going to build your house on the sand, or are you going to build your house on the rock? And this is the rock we're talking about, on God's word, but knowing why you do it. I'm not going to build my house on the rock just for the sake that the guy next door told me to build it on the rock. I need to actually do the study. I need to understand why. Because, if I don't understand the nature of sand and how it washes away and it changes and it is not solid, I will go the easy route, right? The sand's a whole lot easier for me to just flatten out. And in a matter of an hour, I can start to build a foundation on that. But the rock, if I have to understand what is behind that. So I see younger men coming into me on a regular basis that are in their 20s that are saying, because they've not had male mentorship or even God's word, they have nothing, and they're coming in and they're going, I need something. So the idea that the hunger is there and men are willing to ask is, I think, critical for people like you and Kyle and I to keep pushing the message. So thank you so much for your work. How can people get in touch with you, listen to your stuff? Give us some contact.
Yeah. So the podcast is literally everywhere you get podcasts. So Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. If you just search Undaunted, it'll pull up a lot of other random ones. But yeah, it's just Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. We release at least one episode a week. In the last week, we released about 9 episodes because we had a bunch of people come on to talk about the situation going on in Afghanistan. You can also connect with us via our website. That's just www.undaunted.life. It's Undaunted Life everywhere on social and stuff like that. But from our website, can be redirected to our devotionals, to our shop, to, buy t-shirts or whatever, and get to the podcast and all that kind of stuff. And we would just encourage guys, don't keep this stuff a secret. So men kind of have this weird, they have this weird thing where they'll read a really awesome book, they'll put it on their shelf and they're like, that was cool. And then they'll move on. Yeah. And they don't think of hey, who are 3 guys that I should text right now about this book and tell them that they should get it? Oh man, that was a really good podcast episode. And then they don't share it out. So there are guys just like you that need to be fed in the same way that you do. So I would encourage you to share this stuff around. And the last thing, just kind of the shameless commercial, we have given away hundreds of hours worth of content for free, written content, podcast content. The only thing we sell is t-shirts as of right now. We're not monetizing these things. The only way that we're able to stay afloat and do what we do is through donations. And so you can go to our website as well, undaunted.life/donate. That's how people are partnering with us because, $15 a month at Starbucks or $40 a month at the cigar shop or something like that. And they know that that's not bringing them any value. So they're partnering with us and, helping us to equip more men like them to push back darkness.
Good stuff. All right. Well, again, we want to thank you. We also want to thank our sponsors that help us. We want to thank I don't want to do the wrong one. We want to do Casey's Outdoor Solutions and Crimer's Beer House for coming alongside of Strong Dads and giving us the opportunity to have these kind of conversations. So we want to thank those guys for that. We also want to thank all of our listeners out there. Hey, if you guys like what you're hearing, if you like the message that Kyle just delivered, and man, Kyle, with passion, that's just incredible. Please like our shows, give us 5-star ratings and subscribe, pass them along. Just get on our show, do that, get on Kyle's show and do that. Get these messages moving around because just like Kyle said, somebody else out there could benefit by hearing and being prompted by these kinds of messages. So we want to thank you.
Yeah, guys, go out there, be bold in that, man. Just like Kyle was saying, be bold and share the heck out of this show. Let more guys, more men need to hear exactly what Kyle's been talking about, exactly what he stands for, what we stand for here at Strong Dad. So really appreciate you guys. Kyle, thanks so much for coming on our show. Really do appreciate it. So yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Strong Dads.
Thank you.
Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.